G'day folks, how are we? So as I posted up earlier, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a, shall we call it, a special edition of Obi's Guide today. I'm not going to talk about the elephant in the room because we all know what's happening in the world, but what I am going to say is some of us may have had a bit of trouble recently getting some of our usual goods from the shops and the like, and I know amongst my own family and friends that can lead to a little bit of worry and panic. So what I'm going to do is go over a couple of different things. So the first one I'm going to work with is gnocchi. So these are basic staples that you can make, just having a little bit of flour, some potatoes, some eggs, those sort of real staples sitting at home. Most of us do have things like that. So if you ever get caught out in a pinch, you need to make a nice easy dinner. These are the ways to do it. You try and look at some of these recipes online that can be 400 pages long because someone wants to over-explain it. So what I'm going to do is actually simplify it as much as I can. Because watching potatoes boil is a very, very boring thing, I've pre-boiled these. They've been sitting there just long enough after I've drained them that I'm actually able to handle them. So all I'm going to do is peel them. Now, you're not going to get them off perfect, but get as much of the skin away as you can. Again, if you need to, latex gloves really do help with this. Even still, these are quite hot for me. We don't want to let it go cold. Cold potato, bad potato. Cold potato equals stodgy, and it won't break down well enough to create gnocchi. So gnocchi is basically a potato, really a little potato dumpling. Classic little pasta, and goes absolutely beautiful with just some burnt butter and sage, which is what I'm going to do it with today. So all I'm going to do is drop those in there. Now look, some people like to do gnocchi, break the potato up with a ricer. I don't know personally many people that have one at home, and heck, I don't have a ricer around. So what we're going to do today is use the flat of a knife, crush it, and then we're just going to break it up with a knife, and then possibly use a bit of a whisk to make sure we're getting some of those lumps in that out. And then we're going to toss it in with some flour, a bit of egg, bit of salt, and we're going to actually shape it into the classic gnocchi shape. So what I've done with these potatoes initially is kept them whole, as you can see, because we want to try and prevent water as much as possible getting in. We end up with a real stodgy result. And unfortunately, I didn't have some nice starchy, floury potatoes, so I'm using some that are quite waxy, which isn't exactly ideal, but it'll do the trick. If you can get a hold of those big, beautiful starchy ones that you normally use for boiling and mashing, then you are absolutely in for a treat. With these, all it's going to be is, as you can see, they're just that bit firmer, even though they're cooked all the way through. In the book I go into a little bit more about potato, but considering they've written entire books on the subject, I probably can't shorten it down too quickly here. But if possible, get your more starchy style of potato. So, I'm going to chuck those in there. You're also going to need, and I've already got it over there, I've sifted out about 1.5 cups of flour. You will need a little bit more for the bench. And I can offer the advice of this is a ton of fun with the kids. My little one absolutely loves making gnocchi. I don't think she likes eating it as much because I think she realised that it's actually reasonably healthy. So it becomes a little bit like playing with Play-Doh really in the end. So I always add a tiny bit of extra potato because let's be honest, you're not going to get the skin off perfect. Not if you try it, you will lose a little bit. So it works out, I've got 6 smallish potatoes here. A lot of recipes will call for about 4 medium potatoes. Try and get somewhere in that 750 gram mark. Straight into there. Wash your hands, move the skins out of the way. And all we're going to do is in another bowl, we're going to crack an egg. And we're going to whisk that egg. What do I do with my egg? There's my egg. One usually does the trick. Sometimes I'll have a second one around just in case it's a bit drier than I want it to be. And I'll lightly beat that egg. So just your typical. Can use a whisk if you feel makes life easier for you. So what I was saying before about using a knife to crush potatoes. As I said, most people use a potato ricer for this. Again, not something I tend to have around home. So what I'm going to do, lightly crush the potato, And just give it a bit of a chop. Really, all we're trying to do is break up any of those big chunks. You can just completely crush it. You can even use a whisk if you want. I don't know why people insist on a ricer, let's be fair. All it's going to do is ensure that even when you whisk it, you still may leave little chunks. It's not going to change. It's not going to end the world. It's nothing massive. It really is just ease of use. So let's crush these down. With gnocchi, you can store it quite well. So there is a famous story out there of how I ended up in hospital with a, what do you call it? Really bad hand injury from cutting up frozen gnocchi. We try not to talk about that one anymore. But what we're going to do is freeze it down. So when we're finished making it, when I'm finished actually rolling it out and chopping it up, we're going to sit it on some trays and we're going to put those trays into the freezer. Those trays will freeze down and then we'll separate the gnocchi off those trays and you can then just whack them into a freezer bag and hold on to them. I don't advise trying to keep them in your fridge for too long. It's not a pasta that lasts particularly well. And it's not actually one that for us to dry out is particularly easy either. Like I know you'll see the freeze-dried ones and the like on the shelves. It doesn't tend to work as well. All you end up with is actually this kind of yeasty, starchy mess if you try and do it at home. Talking from experience. But you can keep it in the fridge for about 3 days, in the freezer, as with most things, up to about 3 months. And then you just pull it out as you need it, boil it up, and you have a nice gnocchi dinner. Because it's a very filling pasta, you don't tend to need to add a lot to it. Almost done here. I'm not too worried about the potato that's hit that bench there, because that's where I'm going to do the pasta. Okay, that's the last of it. Alright, so what I've got in here now is kind of nicely mashed and chopped up potato. Now, is there some clumps in that? Probably. Is that really going to change the end result? Maybe if you were, you know, trying to win a competition, sure. For dinner, no. Alright, let's make that very clear. Alright, so we've got that. We're going to just get a whisk, and all I'm going to do is just quickly run through this once with said whisk. Alright. My beaten eggs straight into that potato. Again, just give it a wee bit of a mix around. Alright. 1.5 cups of flour. Okay. The fun bit, and the bit that I'm pretty sure wifey is going to cringe knowing I'm doing. Last time I did gnocchi, I think she swore that I was never allowed to do it again, but who knows? Who remembers these things, eh? Alright, potato straight in the middle of your flour. And we're actually just going to start working it gently in. Do not overdo this. You will be super sad at the end of the day when all you end up with is chewy little rubber erasers. So slowly and gently work it in. Alright. We're not even really going to need this in the end, more than, you know, half a minute maybe. See how it's starting to combine, but it's still really flaky. It's kind of where we can actually really start to quickly knead it. So all we're going to do, fold it in, fold it over, push down. Let's get ourselves some. If you start to notice things sticking like that, yeah, it's like playing with Play-Doh, it really is. It takes you back to my childhood. All we're going to do, weird bit of flour, spread it back out, and get your gnocchi back on that. So what we're ultimately looking for is this kind of almost slightly sticky, really kind of silky gnocchi. I personally would probably not go a whole lot more than what I've just done. Okay? because all you're going to do in that point is overwork it, and you'll end up super sad, as I said. So there we have it, our gnocchi dough. Okay. Now, what I would suggest, and what I always do, is rest it just a little bit, but because television doesn't work that way, I'm going to show you how to roll it, and then I will just rest it once I've split it up. As I said, gnocchi is quite filling. It's not something you need 2 big bowls of. So what I'm going to do, this is enough gnocchi for, honestly, 3 to 4 people. Well, unless you're me, and it's roughly half a serve for yourself, but knife, straight through, and straight through. So we're just going to quarter it, sit them off the side. Touch more flour. And I should probably get some trays or something out. We'll just use plates of this because they're right there. So, keep your phallic jokes to yourself, but we're going to roll these into a long, thin shape. You probably want them. You probably want it about as round as a 10-cent piece, or if you're not Australian, half an inch-ish. Then all we're going to do, cut it off into little, almost like potato gems. So around that size. That's absolutely perfect. Sit them off to the side. You can get all fancy and stuff with a fork and put little imprints in them, and you can do all sorts, but the reality is it makes no difference. I used to believe it helped stuff stick to it, but I don't think it does. I mean, that's just absolute baloney. So realistically, that's what you get from a quarter of it. And to be honest, if you've ever seen someone try to eat gnocchi, that'd probably do your average person for a serve. Or it'd do Maisie for about 3 minutes with their sweetheart. If anyone's wondering why Maisie is particularly interested in what I'm doing today, it is not yet dinner time, but it is very close. And I think she senses an opportunity. So I can feel in this that there's a couple little lumps of potato here and there. Again, as I said, this is not restaurant quality. This is not going to win you awards, but it is going to taste pretty damn good. And it's going to cook up just fine. I've done this, pretty much this exact same one, plenty of times, and I have actually had to do it this way in a restaurant before where we haven't had a ricer. So, my advice, scrape this down every so often so that you don't end up with, well, potato glue stuck to your bench. We're going to serve this one with a burnt butter and sage sauce. So all I'm literally going to do there is get about 100 grams of butter. I'm going to put it in the pan. I'm going to heat it up till you kind of can get that, you may know what I mean by this, but the burnt butter smell, that real nutty, yeah, that'd be the right word for it. It's almost like a burnt nut flavour, a smell. As soon as I get that, I'm going to toss in some sage leaves, and then I'll toss the cooked gnocchi through that. The gnocchi, I'll put a bottle of boiling water on, which I'll come back and show you shortly. I'll put a pot of boiling water on and I'll cook them for maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes, basically until they float to the top. Toss them through that burnt butter and sage sauce, and then, yeah, put them in my face. It's just a bit big. So, after I've done these, I'll stop. Through the magic of television, I'll clean up instantly, and I'll be back, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're cooking the actual gnocchi. You've got to be careful of what just happened there too. Sometimes that can just be that there's a particularly wet spot, so we'll just add a bit of flour, just re-roll that. And I'm sure just watching this you can imagine how kids can have a bit of fun too. If you want to use something other than a knife, a spatula, like your scraper style ones, I don't have one here I don't think. Even things like this will work fine to cut through it if you want to let your kids have some fun. And then if you want them to really have fun and keep them occupied for a little while, let that fork go. There it is. put your fork in, and then roll them over. And that's sort of that typical look you may be used to. It's the most painful thing you can watch a young child do, especially when they're doing 70 or 80 pieces, but it'll keep them occupied for a little bit. Alright guys, we'll be back soon. I will show you the recipe for the sauce and what the gnocchi look like as they're actually cooking. Cheers folks, we'll speak soon. G'day guys, welcome back. Me and Maisie apparently, no, she's going to wander off. So, bit of an odd camera angle, but I am trying to give you guys a bit of a view of the stove here. I can't set up the second camera as I normally would. It's a little bit more ad hoc than we would usually do, so bear with me here. Going to cook up this gnocchi. I've still got my pizza dough proving there. We'll get to see what happens with that after. But, got a nice deep pan there, already nice and hot. That's where my butter, you'll hear that sizzling straight away. I actually want to let that burn. I'll show you what it looks like on the camera in a moment, but I do want to let that burn. What you'll get is this real brown colour. You'll start to see these little bits breaking up inside of it. I've got water there at a rolling boil, and all I'm going to do is drop my gnocchi in individually. Don't try and drop them in mass chunks, because you'll become very sad. So, individually, pick them up, drop them in. They won't take long. Basically, once they have risen to the surface, they are cooked. You can see, if you look in the camera there, you can see how it's starting to brown at the bottom there. My butter, I can already smell it. There's a real nutty, flat smell coming through. So I'm only going to do kind of one good sized batch at a time of the gnocchi. Also, pro tip, remember to flour dust your gnocchi before you set it off to rest, because otherwise you end up with what I've got here, which is some bits slightly stuck together. Okay. So I probably did there half that total batch that I did earlier. I've lost all my tea towels. No, I haven't. So that is still browning off beautifully. And what we'll use, if we can, I can never remember the name of these damn things, but fantastic for things like this, because you can scoop under the gnocchi, lift it out, set it on a plate. What we're going to want to do, if you go and just pour gnocchi into a strainer and just dump it all in there, you're going to end up with mashed potatoes. So we do still have to be a bit gentle with gnocchi at times. It is one of those things that we don't want to either overcook, and while you want it in water that's boiling, you also don't want it rolling around in there constantly. So I let the water get to a rolling boil, and now Maisie, not for you. Maisie's inspecting my tools, so she's just making sure that they're all good. Aren't you, sweetie, hey? So, there we go, there's a better view of it. I'm actually going to bring the camera down just a touch for you guys to have a really good look at that. So see how it's starting to discolour? We're starting to get brown. That is what we're looking for. And I'm sorry, I'm no camera genius, and I can really smell that nuttiness now. Alright, I'm just going to readjust that. My apologies, guys. As far as the gnocchi, you won't be able to see it as well from here, but what we're starting to get is gnocchi that's floating to the surface. Once it's kind of hit the surface, it's pretty much good to go. Often what I'll do, that butter, definitely burnt. It's foaming. There's those nice little gritty bits there. I have here a handful of sage leaves, which I've just picked off the stem. You can hear them sizzle. They all start to crackle and sizzle, and they'll actually crisp up in that butter. Okay, and the smell. Do this once, that smell will live with you forever. It's absolutely gorgeous. Alright, so I think these gnocchi are just about ready. So I'm going to take one out real quick, and I'm just going to cut into it and just see what I've got on the inside. So you can see there, we've got a nice uniform cook. No bright white spots to say that the flour's still raw. light, delicate, breaking apart in my mouth, while still having a little bit of sort of firm structure to it. Absolutely perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it straight onto this plate. Okay. So you've got to remember, this is potato and flour. It's, as I've reiterated a couple of times, quite filling. Don't feel like you're underdoing it. I'm going to cook the whole lot because there's 3 of us eating tonight and we're all hungry. And I have a 18-year-old boy here. And I don't know if you've ever fed one of those, but you need a small army of cooks just to maintain cooking for them. So again, one at a time, dropping them in. If you were to cook these from frozen, my biggest advice is cook them in smaller batches, because obviously, rolling boil, you then go and add something frozen, you're going to lose temp. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a really weak, stodgy potato soup rather than gnocchi, because it'll break apart before it can be finished cooking. So I guess the final product of that is kind of this. It isn't appetizing, I'm not going to lie, but once you toss it through the gnocchi, it actually looks really, really good. So I'm going to just add these in here now. You can pan-sear gnocchi as well, which is quite an interesting way of doing it. I've never played around with it a lot. I've eaten it, but I've never personally done it. I believe it just comes down to par cooking it and then searing it on a hot pan with some hot butter. And then you add your sauce to it, and it actually becomes almost like a, I don't know what the description for it would be, like a potato cake almost. So we're just going to gently coat that in that sauce. I will add the weeest amount of salt and pepper because you think butter's quite salty. If you wanted to, you could use unsalted butter. My whole thing is, why would you? Because, you know, butter is flavour, salt is flavour, but it is also possible to overdo things like this. So I'm going to add that there. I will add that last bit of gnocchi when it comes, and then I'll dish it up into some nice little bowls. Ideally, my pizza dough, which is almost ready, would make a beautiful accompaniment to it. Cooked out almost like a focaccia bread style thing with some of that beautiful oil that I made. But alas, it is not the way it will happen today. Some nice generous bowls. I reckon that is close enough to start cooking, that I can start to lay these out. With what's remaining there easily being coated. So again, this isn't a sauce that you don't want the bottom of your pan drowning in butter. Or maybe you do, if you're me. Most people, probably not going to be chasing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to drain those properly over the pan, and then I'm just going to add them straight to that butter mix. And then I'm going to go and sit down and be observed by Miss Maisie for the next 20 minutes while I eat. And then I'm going to come back and show you guys a beautiful pizza dough. And I'm also going to have a bit of fun making a damper for you. For those of you who don't know what a damper is, think soda bread, I guess, would be a close comparison. But it's more well known for, you know, your Aussie outback stories, your men living on the land, men and women living on the land a long while ago. You know, they had very limited rations, and so, you know, flour, salt, water, and making a bread out of that. I'm going to make it the traditional way. You can make it with all sorts, like, you know, self-raising flour and the like, but I'm a bit of a fan of just doing it as is. So again, I'm just tossing that through, getting all that flavour in there. We're all going to sit down to a nice big beautiful meal. and then I will be back to update you on the current status of pizza. So I guess for you guys to see at home, there we have it. Gnocchi, burnt butter and sage. Overall, the longest part really was waiting for the water to boil, because I forgot to put that on early. It really is one of those things, depending on the way you look at it, it could be a 1 spoon or a 3 spoon, given you've actually got to sit there and make the dough. But as you saw, that only takes sort of 5-10 minutes. Let it rest another 5 minutes while you get some water boiling, and then actually making the sauce. So I will leave you guys to it, and I'll be back very, very soon with some lovely pizza dough.